Donald Trump has defended his decision to share data with Russian diplomats, claiming it was done to boost the fight against terrorism.
As president, I wanted to share with Russia, at an openly scheduled White House meeting, which I have an absolute right to do, facts pertaining to terrorism and airline flight safety. Humanitarian reasons, plus I want Russia to greatly step up their fight against ISIS and terrorism.
That statement comes after the Washington Post reported that Trump gave Islamic State-related classified information to the Russian foreign minister and ambassador. The outlet does not provide a source for the allegations, saying it comes from unnamed current and former U.S. officials. The information reportedly shared by the president is said to be so sensitive that it's not even available to American allies or parts of the U.S. government. The allegations have generated significant criticism in the U.S. media.
Code word means like the vital aspects of the story have to be replaced with other words. You have to say things like the package has been delivered. The squirrel is in the basket. The idiot is in the oval.
The reports out tonight are that it was Trump himself, not his staff, driving this crisis with the odd disclosure of classified material to Russian adversaries.
But two former officials knowledgeable about the situation tell CNN that the main points of the story, first reported by the Washington Post, are true.
North Korea, meanwhile, bragged its missile test as a huge tech upgrade that it proved the regime's capable of striking U.S. mainland with an ICBM. While acknowledging some success, Seoul's defense minister begs to differ.
Concerns over the regime firing an ICBM had risen sharply back in January, when North Korean state media said it could launch such a missile, quote, anytime and anywhere. And the latest missile, launched on Sunday and followed by triumphant claims of success from the regime, seemed to indicate that the North's threats were not empty. While on Tuesday, South Korea's defense minister Han Min-gu said in an emergency parliamentary hearing that the latest missile is best categorized as an intermediate-range ballistic missile, or IRBM, and not an ICBM. Han also explained that the ministry had shared military intelligence with the U.S. as well as Japan before reaching that conclusion. The ministry estimates that the latest missile, which North Korea calls a Hwasong-12, can fly a maximum distance of 4.5 to 5,000 kilometers if launched at the optimal angle, but its range would have to be longer than 5,500 kilometers to be properly called an ICBM missile. Meanwhile, there has been growing speculation about how similar or different the so-called Hwasong-12 is to other missiles in the North's current arsenal. The regime uses the Hwasong designation for missiles that run on liquid fuel. And the fact that it's launched another liquid-fueled rocket came as a surprise to many experts, who believe the North favors solid-fuel missiles because they're easier to store and much harder to detect before launch.
South Korea and the United States have agreed to work towards finding ways to achieve the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Young Yu-chan, the press secretary for South Korean President Moon Jae-in, said on Tuesday that the two countries will seek new and practical ways to rid Pyongyang of its nuclear weapons. They agreed to investigate all avenues, including sanctions and dialogue. Yoon also said the two countries plan to hold a leader summit in Washington in June.
In a new round of sanctions against Russia over the situation in eastern Ukraine and Crimea, Kiev's targeting several major Russian internet companies. However, the move could prove bad news for social media users. Well, Ilya Petrenko joins me live in the studio now to tell us more about this. Ilya, thanks for coming in. What's going on here?
Nikki, hi. Well, Ukraine banning Russian social networks. The first thing that comes up on your mind is really no big deal. That's just the usual Kiev banning everything Russian. But really, the scale of this is something that you can barely imagine. They don't call VK.com Russia's Facebook for nothing, you know? Despite all the political changes in Ukraine, the country still remains a part of the so-called RUNet, or the Russian language internet. You know, speaking of VK.com, that's one of the websites that has been banned. A quarter of Ukrainians at least use it daily. It is the biggest social network in Europe, and the numbers come from it being the most popular social network in the former Soviet republics. And it's also the fourth largest website in the world. Then there's also the Odnoklassniki website. That's also another social network, part of the Mail.ru media group. It's got 9 million registered users in Ukraine. Then another internet giant that is being banned is Yandex. It is the fourth biggest search engine in the world. And at least a third of all the searches that are done through computers in Ukraine are done through Yandex. Just to tell you, to give you an example, Yandex and VK.com are among the top 5 websites in Ukraine. And guess what the others are? That is Google and YouTube. Besides this, what the Ukrainian authorities are doing are blocking access to the websites and also restricting the operations of internet security companies like Kaspersky Lab and also Dr. Web. And it doesn't end there, because there are also TV channels and other Russian media organizations like Россия Сегодня, like the Russia TV channel family, and also things like RBC, which is just business news, independent from the government, and TNT. That is still the #1 entertainment TV channel in the post-Soviet space.
EU countries opposed to migrant resettlement quotas have been issued with a warning. The European Commissioner for Migratory Issues has given Poland and Hungary 1 month to comply with the migrant relocation package or face legal action. At the moment, resettlement is way behind target, and some are calling for tough action.
There has to be a legal response by the Commission, which is the guardian of the treaties. So sanctions must be imposed on member states which are simply lacking the political will to abide by the law.
But one Hungarian MEP from Viktor Orbán's party argues relocation is counterproductive. For them, the quota means they're allowed to come, because then they'll be relocated. It's an invitation for those hundreds of thousands of people, and also a chance for human traffickers to carry out more horrific acts, she says. The EU's Migration Commissioner warned Hungary and Poland to comply without naming them.
If no action is taken within 1 month from now, then I will have to move forward by taking I would say legal measures.
But the Commissioner says he's still confident about meeting the target of relocating refugees from Greece and Italy.
Imagine arriving in the UK, going through airport security, and then being ordered to hand over your phone and laptop with the passwords for an examination. And one British Muslim activist was arrested after he refused to do that.
Forcing someone to hand over their passwords is like a digital strip search. It is more pervasive than a physical strip search. With a digital strip search, it's not merely the possessions that you carry that are searched, it's all your personal and professional life that's online.
But the UK government says it has legitimate reasons, referring to Schedule 7 of the UK Terrorism Act. Meanwhile, the detained activist organisation is not shy of scandal, having previously made highly controversial statements on terrorists. And we have reactions to the case.
He's been stopped 20 times in 10 years. This gentleman is someone who appears to attract a lot of attention from our security and intelligence services. We have to wonder why that might be. I mean, presumably, it's not just because he's such a charming chap that they stop him all the time. Cage has had this most disturbing relationship with Jihadi John.
We're not here to discuss the issue of Mohammed Emwazi, aka Jihadi John. We're here to talk about Mohammed Rabbani. That was why I was invited on, so let's keep on the subject matter.
When a new French president is elected, their first trip abroad is to Germany. It's tradition. And with that in mind, France's new president, Emmanuel Macron, spent his first full day in office visiting with German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Berlin. The two leaders discussed Europe's future and pledged to do their best to hold the European Union together. The Union has faced a lot of issues in recent years, including a debt crisis, an influx of migrants, terrorist attacks, and Brexit. And France just faced an election where, at least in part, anti-European sentiment brought a far-right candidate all the way to runoff elections. Both Merkel and Macron were open to Eurozone reforms if necessary. Macron was met with open arms and excited crowds when he arrived. But some in Germany are worried Macron's ideas about the economy could hurt Merkel in this year's election.
The new US ambassador to Israel has been sworn in at a ceremony in Jerusalem. David Friedman was greeted by Israel's president, a lawyer by trade and an Orthodox Jew. He's previously raised funds for a Jewish settlement in the occupied West Bank, captured by Israel 50 years ago. Donald Trump has called the new ambassador a longtime friend and trusted advisor, but the appointment has been overshadowed by controversy over comments by another diplomat preparing the US president's visit to Jerusalem next week, who described the Holy Western Wall in the Old City as part of the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Friedman departed from diplomatic protocol upon his arrival on Monday by visiting the wall, a highly unusual move for a new envoy. It comes as the two countries are debating Trump's election pledge to move the US embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv.
The U.S. is accusing the Syrian government of carrying out mass killings and burning the bodies in a crematorium. The U.S. State Department released satellite images on May 15th of a military prison outside Damascus. Stuart Jones, acting Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, said the U.S. believes about 50 detainees are being hanged every day at the prison. Jones then alleged the bodies are being burned to destroy evidence. The New York Times reports the State Department said parts of the building's architecture are consistent with what a crematorium looks like. The U.S. also said that a photo from January 2015 shows the rest of the complex covered in snow, but the roof of the suspected crematorium doesn't have any snow on it. The State Department suggested that means a lot of heat was coming from inside. Jones called on Russia to hold Syria accountable.
The U.S. State Department has approved a $2 billion sale of missiles to the United Arab Emirates. The Pentagon said May 11th that it had approved the sale of 60 Patriot Advanced Capability 3 and 100 Patriot Guidance Enhanced Missile tactical missiles. It also includes canisters, support equipment, and spare and repair parts. In addition, logistics and technical support from both the U.S. government and the contractors, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, will be provided. The notice said that the proposed sale, quote, will contribute to the foreign policy and national security of the United States by improving the security of an important ally, which has been and continues to be a force for political stability and economic progress in the Middle East. The U.S. is the largest supplier of arms to the UAE, providing 63% of all major weaponry to the country since 2009.
Oil prices have risen as Moscow and Riyadh have called for the extension of an oil production cuts deal. Crude prices rose by 1.5% after the Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak and his Saudi counterpart Khalid Al-Falih said the output cuts need to be extended until 2018. Last year, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and other producers, including Russia, pledged to cut production by around 1.8 million barrels per day during the first half of 2017. Last year's measure was aimed at stabilizing the oil market.
We want to look at Ethiopia now, one of Africa's fastest growing economies. But just recently, the United Nations warned that more than a decade of development is at risk if it continues to ban political opposition and to muzzle the media. Ethiopia now in its 8th month of emergency rule, which was imposed initially to crush the biggest political protest that was seen in 25 years. Just a bit of history for you. It all started in the Oromia region in November of 2015 when the largest ethnic group, called the Oromos, hit the streets demanding more rights. By July of last year, the demonstrations had spread to the Amhara region, home to the second major ethnic group, and as a result, this state of emergency came in. This was October. We're talking arrests, curfews, and media restrictions. It was supposed to last for 6 months, but was then extended for another 4. That's in March it was extended, I should say. Now, the state-run Human Rights Commission says at least 669 people were killed and actually praised the government for the way it handled things, but there's been no independent investigation. And human rights groups say the death toll could be higher. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has urged Ethiopia's government to let his team into the affected areas. He is worried about a possible 26,000 people who've been arrested.
2 people have been killed on the 45th day of protest against the government of President Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. The 2 men, 18-year-old Luis Alvarez and Diego Hernandez, aged 33, were killed as demonstrators clashed with security forces in the volatile Táchira state, close to the border with Colombia. The nationwide protests show no sign of abating, with as many as 41 fatalities reported and hundreds injured. In the central state of Carabobo, authorities claim 3 policemen had been injured, one of them critically.
An unusual sight for churchgoers in this small village in southeastern Portugal. Dora Cruz stands before a dozen, mostly female elderly devotees. At the end of the sermon, she hands out communion wafers representing the body of Christ.
In the beginning, we found it strange, a woman giving the service. But now we're used to it, and that's that.
Young Mother Dora Cruz has been giving the Sunday service for 6 years. With the country facing a shortage of Roman Catholic priests, she was among a handful of women churchgoers who stepped up to help, a sign the aging communities are open to change.
50 years ago, women used to wear a veil to go to church. Today, no one wears them anymore. People never used to go out wearing short skirts. Today, it's not like that. Everything evolves, everything has a cycle, and things change according to our needs.
While women cannot give Mass or take confessions, they can read biblical texts, give communion, celebrate baptisms, and even officiate at funerals. Father Manuel, who presides over 7 parishes and 16 churches, welcomes the move.
When I arrived here 19 years ago, there were 3 of us priests. Then gradually, after 3 years, I was the only one. Given the circumstances, it's been absolutely essential for us to find a solution.
Last year, Pope Francis set up a group to study the role of women deacons in the early days of Christianity. The move was seen as a potential historic opening towards a place for women in the clergy.
Investigators want to know who launched the global WannaCry ransomware attack, and some experts think the group could be linked to North Korea. A security researcher for Google appears to be the first to have noticed the link. He found that computer code used in an early version of WannaCry matched code used by the Lazarus Group, which has been tied to the North Korean government. Lazarus is probably best known for hacking Sony Pictures in 2014 in an apparent protest against the movie The Interview. And last year, the group was accused of stealing $81 million from a bank in Bangladesh. Just hours after the Google researchers' discovery, cybersecurity firms Kaspersky Lab and Symantec confirmed they also detected similarities in the codes. But experts say it's too early to blame the WannaCry attack on North Korean hackers. Computer codes are often shared among different groups, so the matching code isn't definitive proof Lazarus was behind the cyber attack.
World-famous whistleblower Edward Snowden's among several hundred people to have signed an open letter to Donald Trump. It calls on the president to drop all charges against WikiLeaks and his boss, Julian Assange. RT's Laura Smith has the details.
So this is a letter. It's short but sweet, I should say. It calls on President Trump to close the grand jury investigation into Julian Assange and his WikiLeaks staff, drop any charges against them. And it invokes the spirit of free speech. It says that a threat to WikiLeaks' work is a threat to all free journalism. And it rather pointedly reminds President Trump that a free press was key to him having a platform on which to run for president at all. It's been released by the Courage Foundation, which is an organisation that raises funds for the legal defence of whistleblowers, including Edward Snowden. And he's just one of the more than 750 signatories to this letter. People are signing all the time. Journalists, activists, artists, public figures, people like Noam Chomsky, the actor Pamela Anderson, film director Ken Loach, Vivienne Westwood, to name just a few. You may be asking why now? Well, it appears that the US is stepping up its attempts to get its hands on Julian Assange. The Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, just last month called it a priority.
We are going to step up our effort, and already are stepping up our efforts on all leaks. This is a matter that's gone beyond anything I'm aware of. We have professionals that have been at the security business of the United States for many years that are shocked by the number of leaks.
And how will this be received in the White House? Well, frankly, it's anyone's guess. Donald Trump, as we know, has something of a love-hate relationship with WikiLeaks. He loves them for leaking Hillary Clinton's emails, but he hates them for pretty much everything else.
This just came out. WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks.
Papers are being leaked, things are being leaked. It's criminal action, criminal act.
Hackers have reportedly stolen an upcoming Disney film, and they're threatening to release it online.
Pirates. Pirates.
Disney's CEO Bob Iger told employees Monday a film was stolen, but he wouldn't say which one. Deadline reports it's Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Men Tell No Tales. Iger said the company is working with the FBI and it won't pay the ransom the hackers are demanding. This is the second major hack in less than a month. A hacking group stole the latest season of Netflix's Orange is the New Black. Netflix wouldn't pay up either, and the hackers released most of that season early. But Disney may have a little more to lose in this case, since Netflix makes its money from paid subscriptions, not ticket sales. And Pirates needs a lot of the latter, after reportedly going at least $70 million over budget during production.
It's not the aftermath of a teenager's beach party. It is an uninhabited island, one of the world's most remote, only visited every few years. A new study shows Henderson Island in the South Pacific has getting on for 40 million pieces of plastic. Its vulnerability to ocean currents means trash from South America or fishing boats ends up here.
The top offenders on the beach were, by and large, everyday consumer items that most people don't really hesitate when they use them to think about what it really means and where they might end up. Global estimates of plastic on beaches, whether that's on islands or on the mainland, is likely a very significant underestimate of the true scale of the problem.
Henderson is part of the UK's Pitcairn Islands group. It's listed as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, whose website describes it as a gem with endemic plants and birds. But researchers say almost every island, every ocean species is now affected by global waste.
In 100 days, a highly anticipated solar eclipse will fill the American skies from Oregon to South Carolina. The last time a total eclipse appeared across this many states was nearly a century ago. Astronomers and researchers are now preparing for a rare chance to collect data on the sun's outer atmosphere. RT's Brigida Santos has more from Los Angeles.
This summer, on August 21st, millions of Americans will get a chance to see one of nature's most mysterious wonders, a total eclipse of the sun. Michael Zeiler, an expert in geographic information systems, describes the Great American Eclipse as a scene of unimaginable beauty. He runs a website dedicated to the upcoming event and says a solar eclipse takes place due to sheer cosmic coincidence.
The sun is about 400 times larger than the moon, but the sun is about 400 times further away than the moon. So as a result, they're just about the same size in the sky. And so we have the very happy coincidence that the moon just covers the sun perfectly so that we can see the sun's outer atmosphere, its corona.
The last time a total eclipse swept the continental United States was in 1918, nearly a century ago. Researchers say they plan to take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime event.
Solar physicists know that the temperature of the sun's surface is roughly 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But the corona is about 1 to 2 million degrees Fahrenheit. And so that's a big difference. It's counterintuitive that the temperature would increase as you go away from the sun. So there's a big mystery about that.
Zeiler advises skywatchers to enjoy the moment and pay close attention because the eclipse will only be visible for about 2 minutes and 40 seconds before disappearing.
The eclipse travels across the nation from Oregon to South Carolina in 93 minutes. Those 93 minutes gives astronomers the opportunity to take a very detailed look at the sun's corona as it changes and evolves.
During that time, the moon will completely cover the sun so observers can safely look at it directly with the naked eye. However, experts at NASA recommend wearing solar viewing glasses.
People can expect to see the most amazing sight of their lifetime. Not only does the sky suddenly turn dark, about the same darkness as a deep twilight, and that they'll be able to see the planets and the brighter stars. But they'll see where the moon is, the blackest black that they've ever seen in their life.
NASA has posted an interactive map online for viewers to find out what time the eclipse will be observable in its 70-mile path.